Hello everybody. So, as you know, I like to mess around with the engine looking for hilarious lines and crazy gambits, and today I've got something new to show you. So first we need to get into this weird position which can be reached by so many different move orders and openings in general, but well, I am a Scandi player, so I go d5 if my opponent starts with e4, and in and in this position, if they go knight to f3, this is the Tennyson Gambit, quite popular gambit. I can go for this kind of counter gambit with e5. So both of my pawns are now hanging, and I actually would like both of them to be captured. So if they capture with the knight, I just bring knight to f6 and let them have the other pawn as well. This position can be reached by a ton of different move orders. You can play it with e5 as your first move, and if they go knight to f3, you can go for this elephant gambit. And also you can play Petrov. Looks like we are going for a Stafford maybe, but here you can play d5 and they capture. So as you can see, this is like you choose your way how to get this. I am a Scandi player, so I like to play it like this. And fun fact is that after e5, some of the players are already pre-moving knight to g5 as they would normally continue with the Tennyson Gambit. Well, but in this case, it would just hang a knight for free. So I already collected some knights this way. But the point is that we want to get our pawns captured, so here we can recapture with the queen. Actually, this position was featured recently on a Jonathan Trans YouTube channel. Thanks to that guy, I fell in love with crazy gambits and crazy chess in general. And if you don't know Jonathan Trans, just go check out his channel. I will leave a link in the description. So in this position, white has two main moves. One is pawn to d5, holding on to the knight, and the second move is just knight back to f3. So if your opponent will play knight to f3, you can develop your knight to c6, and here most of the players play the most logical move, knight to c3, harassing the queen, but the queen can swing over to the h5, and in this position, unfortunately, almost everybody plays bishop to e2, a very logical move, but it will get really spicy after bishop to g4, and actually that position scores pretty good for black, as there is like many traps and white needs to be careful. But what caught my eye is that in this position, the engine is recommending knight to b5 as the strongest continuation for white. And there are only 5 games that included this move, knight to b5. And this is where it gets hilarious. Because in this position, you have a first crazy move, bishop to b4, claiming that your bishop is drunk, hitting nothing, allowing knight takes on c7 with a fork. Yeah, this is the good stuff. So the knight captures on c7 with check, the king slides over. By the way, this is a very useful move. It allows this rook to come to the e file, but shh, don't tell white about that. So they are going to capture your rook for free, and here you go like, what about my other bishop? Did those bishops drink together? So let's see where he goes. Oh, bishop h3, totally wasted just as well. This is what I call the drunken bishop's gambit. So your opponent may be like, let me just grab the drunk bishop. And well, actually this is totally losing for white, because you can go rook to e8 check. They want to block with the bishop or maybe with their queen. And here you go queen captures on f3, hitting this bishop, hitting this rook, and actually there is only one move for white that doesn't end up in a forced checkmate, and that is to castle. Anything else is a forced checkmate in about 6 moves. So here you can grab this bishop, And now once again they have only like one correct move, but it's losing anyway, and that is pawn to d4. And here it allows your drunk bishop to just go even deeper in white's territory and go bishop to e1. So they cannot capture this bishop. That would simply allow queen captures on f2 with incoming checkmate. So what they need to do is protect the f2 pawn with their bishop, and after that you can go knight to d5, threatening to remove the bishop, and yeah, that's it for white. Here the engine recommends to give up the queen for this rook to survive longer, but let's go back and let's see what happens if they don't capture the bishop. So our bishop just landed on h3, and actually in this position white has only one correct move, and that would be bishop to e2, just simply allowing bishop captures on g2, and Stockfish says this is 0, 0, 0, 0. But let's talk about it later, and let's see some other options for white and how to punish them. So first of all, if they play just some kind of random waiting move, for example pawn to a3, kicking away the bishop, you have some craziness with rooks to e8 check. So they are naturally going to block with the bishop, although the Stockfish is already yelling that blocking with the queen is smarter. Here you can capture on f3 with your queen, so giving up your queen, because if they capture it you go knight to d4, and there is no way for white to stop the checkmate with knight captures on f3, hitting the king, and the king is boxed in with these drunk bishops. He cannot even make a luft because of this drunk bishop, and this is just, you know, crazy stuff. So let's go back. So bishop to h3. Now there is this other move, which is rook to g1. With this move white is holding on to this pawn and making it possible for this bishop to develop without hanging this pawn. But if they choose this approach, they will end up in a losing position anyway after rook to e8 check. So they need to block it with the bishop, and here knight to d5 is a strong move, threatening knight to f4, hitting this bishop. So in this position, if white tries to snap this drunk bishop, here we can capture this knight, and now white is forced to go king to f1, otherwise we are just going to, you know, jump to the f4, and there is too much stuff hitting this bishop, and this will result in a checkmate. So they need to go king to f1, and after that we are going to capture this with check, so the rook needs to block it, and here our knight finally makes it to the f4 square, hitting the rook, hitting the bishop. Bishop to f3 is forced, and after that knight to d4, hitting the bishop once again, and the bishop has no squares other than capturing on the b7, and after that we are going to capture, so they recapture with the bishop, and here queen to f5, and we are down 5 points of material, but the Stockfish is saying that it is like almost +5 for black. There is no way for white to not lose their queen in the next couple of moves. It's crazy, but their queen is not able to develop on any square, and they cannot even develop like anything else. They cannot push any of these pawns to develop the dark square bishop. Let me just show you. If they push, I don't know, d3, then there is rook to e1, and they are losing their queen. If they push c3, you know, like a nice fork of our pieces, well, we go queen to d3 check, king goes to g1, and then knight to c2, and we are hitting the rook, and also we are threatening rook to e1 check and winning the queen. And if they go, if they push b3, then there is rook to e2, and they have to give up the queen for the rook, because there is no other way for them to stop checkmate. Well, crazy stuff with this Gambit. Alright, let's go back. Let's see this one more time. So if white goes rook to g1, we go rook to e8 check, so they block it, and then knight to d5 is the continuation. We just looked at if they capture the bishop, but then the other, and this is the most correct move, is king to f1. But the problem is that after this move, our knight makes it to f4 right away, and now we are hitting this bishop twice, and there is actually no way for white to save this bishop, and they cannot even move it to safety. So if they try moving it somewhere, I don't know, let's say bishop to c4, then we go queen to g4, and this is forced checkmate. There is just too much stuff attacking this g2 pawn, and when combined with this rook controlling this whole e-file, we are winning with the forced checkmate. And if they try, for example, to hold on to this bishop with some other piece, well, there is only this knight on f3 available to jump to d4, trying, to support this bishop, and maybe try to go for some discover attack on our queen, but this is losing anyways because rook captures the bishop, and if they recapture with the knight, then we have knight captures on g2, and if they capture the knight, then queen to g4, and who is going to save this poor rook, poor pinned rook? Well, nobody. Alright. So if they cannot save the bishop, what should they do? Well, the stockfish is suggesting the move d4, and after that we are going to capture this bishop. And here the strongest thing for white to do is at least develop one piece, develop a bishop with a check. So our king needs to move. And then queen to d3. So just allowing us to capture this rook because there was actually no way to save it. So here we can just grab this rook, and after the king recaptures, this is a crazy position, but we are winning because our king will be able to pick up this knight, and we will be able to be up a piece and winning. The only thing we need to do is go queen to g4 first, to disallow this capture and actually to force some, structural weaknesses of white's kingdom, and well, we should be winning this game without any problems. Alright, let's go all the way back and let's discuss the correct approach by white. So remember, bishop to h3, the correct reply from white would be bishop to e2. There is a ton of crazy lines which most of the times ends up in a forced draw, but for the sake of the length of this video, let me just show you the most crazy lines. So here we are able to capture on g2, and now the rook is forced to g1, and after that we can cover our bishop with our queen. In this position, white has only one correct move, and that is pawn to c3. If they play something else, for example, if they play pawn to a3, harassing our bishop, we have a forcing way to win their queen. Let me show you. So first we bring our rook to e8, and they can capture our bishop. It's the best move for them. And here we can capture this knight on f3. Here the stockfish is recommending rook to a3, hitting our bishop, but we can capture on h2, and now we are hitting their rook, and that would come with the checkmate, so that's like better rook attack. So here they can deliver this little check, but our king just goes to c8 with no problem, and here they need to bring their rook to f1 to not get checkmated, but after that we can capture on e2, and we are winning the queen next turn. Alright, so let's go back and let's discuss the correct move, which is pawn to c3. Even though this move attacks our bishop, they can never capture our bishop and not get a losing position. Just remember that. So after pawn to c3, we are going to capture the knight on f3, and here white needs to make a decision. They can either capture our bishop back, or they can also play rook to g3, hitting our queen and the bishop as well. So let's first have a look at bishop captures bishop. After this, we are going to play rook to e8 check, and we force this bishop back to e2. And here we can capture on h2, threatening the rook. So once again, the response for white is forced. They need to go king to f1 to cover the rook. And here we can force a draw with knight to e4, because with this move we are threatening checkmate on f2, and the only correct way to deal with this is to play rook to g2, and after that we are able to shuffle our pieces like this and get a draw. But if for some reason white decides to hold on to the f2 pawn with their queen, then this is super losing, because we have this rook lift with rook to e6. And now we are winning once again. And the stockfish gives following line. Pawn to d3, check. The rook blocks, so we attack it once more with our rook. Here bishop to f3, and now funny move, knight to d4. And although both of these pieces are hanging, they cannot capture it, because, well, if they capture this bishop, then queen to h1 check, and this is checkmate. And if they capture our knight instead, well then, once again, queen to h1 check, queen captures with, no, I'm sorry, it was rook captures with check, and after king to e2, then rook captures the queen with checkmate. So this was the line where they captured the bishop with their bishop. Now let's talk about rook to g3. So here you have a choice. You can either capture this bishop on e2 and go for something that Stockfish says is totally equal, or you can play a funny move, queen takes on h2, which I will talk about later. So let me just first show you. Bishop captures bishop on e2. Here they can capture your queen and you capture their queen, and then they get to capture one of your bishops, and the Stockfish says that this is equal, or maybe a little bit better for black, I'm not really sure. Or if they capture your bishop instead, you can here capture on h2, and if your opponent just gets greedy and capture the bishop on b4, just know that you are once again in a winning position after knight to d4. But let me just not go any deeper in this line. What I want to talk about is the move queen takes on h2, and just leave your drunk bishops hanging. We have this saying in Slovakia that when you are drunk, you are immortal. So that kind of apply here. You see, they cannot capture this dark square bishop because of queen to h1 check. So now they have to block it like this, and then rook comes to the file, and they have to just start giving up stuff before it's checkmate. And they can, though, capture this light square bishop, and they have to choose with which piece they want to do this. So if they capture with the rook, here you have a funny move, knight to d4, hitting the rook and hanging the knight. And actually they cannot capture any of your pieces. If they capture the knight, then you can go rook to e8. So now you are pinning this bishop and threatening queen to h1 checkmate. So the only way to deal with this would be to block the pin with their rook, but you can capture it. Now f captures on e3 is forced, and here you go queen to h4 check, king needs to go to f1, and then queen to h1 check, king goes to f2, and knight to e4 is checkmate. And if they capture the bishop instead, you have pretty much the same sort of tactics. You go rook to e8, they gotta block this e-file. But here you go knight to e4 first. So here you are threatening to capture on f2 with checkmate. And now the only way to deal with this threat is to move the queen away so that the king has some breathing room. So let's say queen to a4. So you can capture this pawn. They need to go king to d1. You go queen to g1 check. So they need to block it and lose their bishop. And here they need to block it with their rook. And after that, this is checkmate. So that's just a funny line. If they capture the bishop with their rook. There is a refutation of this. Like the only not losing move is pawn to d3. Just, you know, leaving the rook hanging, not capturing this, not capturing this. Just a random pawn push saves the day for white, and this is like plus 1 point something for white. But I would go for this line any day because I just don't believe I will find anybody who would refute this. Alright, and now the last line that I will show you is when they capture the bishop with their bishop. I saved this for the last thing to show you, as this is like the most funny thing I've seen in chess. Well, so here, what was the move? So here you go bishop d6 hitting the rook. And the best thing to do for white is to capture this pawn on g7, and after that you can bring your queen to h6 hitting the rook. Now if the rook decides to go back on this on this g file, it will be a losing position. Actually, the only move here is to capture on f7. After that we can give this check with our rook. Now they don't have the option to block this check because then queen to h1 is checkmate. So they need to play king to f1, and after that we are going to play knight to g4. just randomly hanging one of our pieces. But the point is they cannot capture the knight because now once again queen to h1 is checkmate, as this bishop is no longer covering h1. And the thing is that in this position white has only one move to survive and not get crushed. And the move is like totally stupid. The move is rook to d7 check. Well, I know, yes. The point is obvious that you are going to capture the rook and they recapture the knight with a check, so they don't get checkmated immediately and they gain some time to deal with this threat of checkmate. But it's so funny, like, who would play this? Queen to d7 check, and you can even, you don't have to accept this, you can go king to c8. Well, now the best thing for white is, well, queen to c7 check. And you can repeat this, or I don't know, if you play with a cheater. Or you can just capture the rook, and the stockfish says that it is like a slightly better for playing in this position. So guys, that's it. This video got a lot longer than I thought it would, but you know, there are so many funny and unbelievable lines to explore in these variations, so I just wanted to share the most crazy ones. And alright guys, thanks for watching, take care and bye.